Good morning, Team Anastasis. Happy Tuesday. Yesterday, we watched a video that today we're going to follow up and connect with a parable in Luke 12. But before we do that, I want to talk a little bit about the video that we watched yesterday. It was about rich, right? We're reading a parable about the rich fool. And so before we do that, I want to talk a little bit about what does it mean to be rich? And I don't know about you, but especially growing up, I thought rich meant that you had like billions and billions of dollars and you lived in this massive mansion. And I even thought like Kevin McAllister, right, in Home Alone, riding around in limos would be something that you would do if you were rich. And getting like the biggest hotel room that your entire family could fit in would be rich. And it was this like very opulent, like, you know, everything. You had brand new, really expensive clothes, and all the you only wore new clothes. That's kind of what I thought of when I thought of being rich. But what we know is that only 8% of the entire world has a car to drive. So if you came here today in a car, which I know you did because I checked you in, you are considered rich in the world, among the richest 8% of the population of the entire world. And we don't always think of ourselves as rich, but we really are. We had running water to wash our hands as soon as we got into school. And most of the world does not have clean running water that comes to their homes and to their schools. So we don't often think of ourselves as rich, right? We usually think of the next version of what that would mean. But really, in the world, we are very rich. We are extremely rich in the United States. And we don't often think about ourselves that way. So really, this story is not just about somebody else who maybe has more money than we do. It's also a story about us because we are rich in the world. And so we are also in this culture where we're told that we should want more and more and more and more all the time. So if you think about even when you're scrolling through Instagram, right, you're looking at the shoes that somebody else has, or the new scooter or skateboard, or the newest video game console. We're always looking and being sold that we should want more and more and more. Even our cleaning products, which seems so ridiculous, but clean 10 times faster, clean better, right? Everything is designed to make us want more. The newest iPhone, the newest AirPods, whatever it is, we are pretty conditioned in this country that we should always be seeking more and want more. And if you're anything like me, I spent a lot of time when I was growing up making my Christmas list of the things I wanted. And it, as soon as I opened those things, it was like, okay, what's going to go on my birthday list? So we are kind of in this interesting place in the United States where we're conditioned to really want more all the time, even as we are very rich. When you look at us in comparison with the rest of the world, we are a rich country, and each one of us is rich. So though this could be a story about somebody else, it really is a story about us. So in chapter 12, we're going to start in verse 13. It says, then someone called from the crowd. So there's a crowd gathered around Jesus. He's there with his disciples. But somebody calls out from the crowd and he says, teacher, please tell my brother to divide our father's estate with me. So that's kind of a weird thing for somebody to yell out to Jesus. But in Jesus' day, what would happen is generations of people they would build up wealth, right? They'd have a farm or a family property. And in Jesus' time, that usually went when the father passed away, that usually got handed down to the oldest brother, right? So not even the oldest child, because if the child was a girl, it wasn't usually passed down to her. It was usually passed down to the oldest boy in the family. And so my guess is, because this person is saying, teacher, tell my brother to divide our father's estate with me, my guess is this is probably a younger brother, a younger sibling. And he's yelling out to Jesus and saying, hey, tell my older brother to be generous and split my father's estate with me so that I have something too. And then Jesus replies, friend, who made me a judge over you to decide such things as that? So Jesus is like, why are you even asking me to be the judge of that? And then he says, beware. Don't be greedy for what you don't have. Real life is not measured by how much we own. Now, in Jesus' time, just like our time, we often measure our life by how much we own, right? We try to accumulate more and more things, and we measure how successful we are or how great of a job we have by how much it lets us purchase. So then Jesus tells a story, tells a parable. And he says, a rich man had a fertile farm. So a fertile farm means that it's growing, it's really healthy, it's thriving. We're getting great produce out of this farm. So he says, a rich man had a fertile farm that produced fine crops. In fact, his barns were full to overflowing. So he's got more than enough to eat. And he says to himself, I know, I'll tear down my barns and I'll build bigger ones. And then I'll have room enough to store everything. And I'll sit back and say to myself, my friend, you have enough stored away for years to come. Now take it easy, eat, drink, and be merry. But then that night, God says to him, you fool, you're going to die this very night. And who will get all that you've stored up for yourself? Yes, a person is a fool to store up earthly wealth, but not have a rich relationship with God. Then turning to his disciples, Jesus says, so I tell you, don't worry about everyday life, whether you have enough food to eat or clothes to wear. For life consists of far more than food and clothing. Look at the ravens. They don't need to plant or harvest or put food in the barns because God feeds them, and you're far more valuable to him than any birds. Can all of your worries add a single moment to your life? Of course not. And if worry can't do little things like that, then what is the use of worrying over bigger things? Look at the lilies and how they grow. They don't work or make their clothing, yet Solomon in all his glory was not dressed as beautifully as they are. And if God cares so wonderfully for flowers that are here today and gone tomorrow, won't he more surely care for you? You have so little faith. Don't worry about the food, what to eat and drink. Don't worry whether God will provide it for you. These things dominate the thoughts of most people, but your Father already knows your needs. He'll give you all you need from day to day if you make the kingdom of God your primary concern. So there's a lot packed in there. But let's start with this idea of barns overflowing with food. So I'm going to go back to Exodus for just a moment. And in Exodus, what we find is the God's people, the Israelites, are in slavery, and the Egyptians have made them slaves. And the Egyptians were known for building these massive, amazing pyramids and storehouses to stock more than they needed, all of their treasures, their riches, those kinds of things. So the Israelites are literally slaves building for somebody else these storehouses to store this massive amount of wealth. And God frees the Israelites from slavery. And it's not a generation later that we find God's people doing the same thing. So they start accumulating wealth and they start building these massive storehouses to store riches and wealth and to kind of hoard things, right? To hoard things more than they need. And how do they do that? They start enslaving people and they start building these massive military bases, because when you have all of this wealth stored up, now you've got to have you've got to have some way to protect it, right? So that is the context that Jesus is talking within, and he would have known those stories of the Israelites. He would have seen these kind of storehouses. And so he tells this story, and he starts the story by saying, a rich man. So this isn't somebody who needs more. We know right from the get-go that he's wealthy, he's rich. And we also know, it says he had a fertile farm that produced fine crops. He's got a great farm that is producing food regularly, and it's producing good food. And instead of sharing that or giving it to people who might be going hungry, this rich man says, it says his barns were overflowing. So he's got more, he's got enough stored up for himself, but he's got more than enough stored up in these barns. And instead of looking around and saying, who might else be able to use this food and what I'm storing up? And he says, I know, I'll tear down my perfectly good barns full of food, and I'll build bigger ones to store even more. So he's already got wealth. He's already got this great farm that's regularly producing good food, and he's storing up even more. So rather than looking at where could he sell it or where could he do the most good, it's all accumulate even more and more and more. And then it says, then he says, I'm going to have enough stored away for years to come. And then he says, I'm going to take it easy. I'm going to let my farm, go, and I'll just take it easy. And I'm just going to eat, drink, and be happy on my own. And then God says to him, okay, but you were going to die tonight. You didn't know this, but you're going to die tonight. And then who gets all of this? You've saved all of these things for yourself. And now what's going to happen? You die and it just sits. Nobody gets to benefit from that. So an interesting story here. And then he says a person is a fool to store up earthly wealth. And then later, he starts talking to the disciples about God takes care of us. And then later it says, he will give you all you need from day to day if you make the kingdom of God your primary concern. So the kingdom of God is what we build together and what we do together, right? It's the things that, it's how do we become the church? How do we do things that make all of us better off? So if we're giving and not storing for ourselves, if we're not hoarding for ourselves, and we're thinking about, if we're the richest 8%, what might we need to do for people who are not as fortunate as we are, who are not the rich in the story? How might we think of being generous with other people? And make sure that everybody has enough to eat, to drink clean water, to have a warm coat in their closet when we have, 15. I don't know how many coats you have, but I do know that we accumulate a lot of them in Lost and Found. And funny enough, some of them never get claimed because you get another jacket. Somebody buys you another jacket, or you have more at home. So we're the rich in this story. What do you think this story might tell us about the character of God, and what we have as our character as well, when we are in relationship with God, when we're doing what we should be doing? What I pull out of this story is that God is generous, that we're supposed to be content because he takes care of us, that we are supposed to be focused on each other and not on things, and that God serves, right? It says that he's the one who provides all of these things. So again, generosity and service. So if that is God's character, how might we be generous? How might we consider others? And if we are the rich in the story, what does that mean for us? What's our responsibility? So I know some of the other classes, the older classes, are working with an organization called Project Worthmore that we'll all get to know more about in the upcoming weeks. But as we work with Project Worthmore, I want you to remember this parable and think about how might we be generous? How might we be content with what we have? Do we really need, 10 more of whatever it is that we might want? Or could we be content? Could we share the things that we have with those who are maybe not as fortunate as we are, who are not the rich in the story? How do we build the kingdom of God? And so that's what I would like for you to talk with your classmates about today. And I hope you have a wonderful day. I hope that you feel richly blessed and that you start considering how we might richly bless others. So have a great Tuesday, and we will see you for another Metanoia on Thursday.